It began with a desperate message. In the small village of Bethany, just 2 miles from Jerusalem, 2 sisters sat in quiet agony. Mary, her eyes red and swollen, clutched her hands in her lap and stared at the floor. Martha stood by the window, looking out into the dusty road as though willing the figure of their friend to appear. But the road remained empty. Lazarus was dying. The sisters sent word to Jesus days earlier, "Lord, the one you love is sick." That was all they said. They didn't beg, didn't command. Just those simple words, full of hope and faith. Surely Jesus would come. He loved Lazarus. He loved them. But Jesus didn't come. A strange delay. When their servant reached Jesus, 2 days' journey away, he found him teaching in the Jordan countryside. The message was whispered into his ear, and for a moment Jesus looked into the distance, his eyes far away. "This sickness will not end in death," he said to his disciples, though the messenger was still standing there. "It is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it." Relieved, the servant hurried back to Bethany to reassure the sisters. But Jesus stayed where he was. 1 day passed, then another. The disciples were puzzled. They knew how much Jesus loved this family, and they knew Lazarus was deathly ill. Why wait? Finally, after 2 more days, Jesus spoke up, "Let's go back to Judea." His disciples objected. "But Rabbi," they said, "a short while ago they tried to stone you there, and yet you are going back." Jesus' gaze was steady. "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep," he said, "but I am going there to wake him up." The disciples misunderstood. "Lord, if he sleeps, he will get better." Then Jesus told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead. And for your sake I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him." Grief in Bethany. By the time Jesus arrived at Bethany, Lazarus had been dead 4 days. The sisters were surrounded by mourners from Jerusalem, family, friends, even professional wailers. The air was thick with the scent of myrrh and tears. When Martha heard Jesus was near, she left the house and ran to meet him. Her face was wet with grief, but she fell at his feet anyway. "Lord," she said, her voice breaking, "if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Even in her pain, she clung to a glimmer of faith. "But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask." Jesus looked into her eyes, so full of sorrow and hope, and said, "Your brother will rise again." Martha nodded. "I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day." But Jesus shook his head gently. "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this?" She nodded, though tears still ran down her cheeks. "Yes, Lord," she said. "I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world." Then she ran back to the house. "Mary," she whispered, "the teacher is here and is asking for you." Mary rose quickly, and the mourners followed her, thinking she was going to the tomb. But she went straight to Jesus. When she saw him, she fell at his feet and wept. "Lord," she sobbed, "if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Jesus wept. Jesus saw Mary weeping. He looked up and saw the others mourning as well, wailing, grieving, crushed under the weight of death. And something inside him stirred. He was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. The Greek word used here speaks of more than sadness. It speaks of anger, indignation, not at the people, not at the sisters, but at death itself, at the way it stole and broke and tore apart what God had made good. "Where have you laid him?" he asked. "Come and see, Lord," they replied. And as he walked to the tomb, surrounded by the sound of sobs, Jesus himself began to weep. Why did Jesus weep, knowing he would raise Lazarus? He wept because he felt the sisters' grief as his own. He wept because he saw what death had done to humanity. He wept because of their pain, and because even when you know how the story ends, the ache of the present moment is real. He wept because love always weeps with those who mourn. The crowd whispered, "See how he loved him." But others scoffed. Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying? The tomb. Jesus, still deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. "Take away the stone," he said. Martha hesitated. "But Lord," she said, "by this time there is a bad odor. He has been there 4 days." But Jesus turned to her, and there was no hesitation in his voice. "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" So they rolled the stone away. Jesus lifted his eyes toward heaven and prayed, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me." Then he called out in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come forth." Life returns. The crowd held its breath. Then, from the darkness of the tomb, came the sound of shuffling feet. A figure emerged, wrapped in strips of linen, a cloth covering his face. It was Lazarus, alive. "Take off the grave clothes and let him go," Jesus said. Gasps of shock turned into cries of joy. The mourners who had wept now shouted praise. Martha fell to her knees, and Mary clung to her brother, tears of relief streaming down her face. The funeral turned into a celebration, tragedy into testimony. In the days that followed, many came to Bethany just to see Lazarus with their own eyes. They wanted to see this man who had walked out of a tomb, who had sat in the cold grip of death and been called back by the voice of the Son of God. Some believed in Jesus that day. Others went to the Pharisees, reporting what he had done. And even though it hardened some hearts, it glorified God. The raising of Lazarus was the sign that would set in motion the final days of Jesus' ministry, leading him to Jerusalem, to the cross, and beyond, to his own resurrection. But for Mary and Martha, it was simpler than that. They had grieved. They had despaired. They had wondered why Jesus delayed. But now they knew his timing was perfect. What felt like a tragedy had become their greatest testimony. Jesus didn't just heal the sick. He didn't just comfort the grieving. He showed them that he held the keys to life and death itself. In Bethany, in a little house where once there was mourning, there was now laughter and singing. Because Lazarus, who was dead, was alive again. Why the delay? It wasn't that Jesus didn't care. He cared so much that he wanted to give them more than healing. He wanted to show them his power over death. He wanted them to see the glory of God, not just in theory, but in the flesh. He waited because the greater miracle required it. He waited so the sisters would learn to trust his heart even when they couldn't see his hand. He waited so that everyone standing by that tomb would know that death itself bows to his command. And when the time was right, he came. And when he came, everything changed. The power over death. That day in Bethany is a promise that death does not have the final word, a promise that grief will turn to joy, a promise that those who believe in him, though they die, will live. It is also a reminder that Jesus enters into our sorrow. He weeps with us. He walks with us to our tombs, and he calls us out into life. For every Martha who struggles to believe, for every Mary who can only weep, for every Lazarus who lies in the grave, Jesus comes, and his voice still calls, "Come forth."